You know, when it comes to the Chronicles of Narnia, sometimes the most important secrets are hidden, right there in plain sight. Yet they can lay undiscovered for years or even decades after they were written. And during my research for this episode, I discovered an incredible, important hidden key to the Voyage of the Dawn Treader that's so unbelievably obvious, you'll wonder why you've never seen it before. Now, this isn't just some cool little Easter egg we're talking about here. This is a complete paradigm shift. It's the key that unlocks the entire meaning of the book. It ties together the entire story from every plot point and even helps make sense about other little odd bits and ends of the story. Now, I originally intended to make an episode about the deeper meaning of the 7 Lost Lords of Narnia, and that's mostly what we're going to do here. But as you'll soon see, there is so much more here that we'll be breaking this episode up into a 2-parter. And after I've laid out the groundwork, I'll show you what I believe is a new discovery based on an old theory that will change the way that people think about the book from this day forward. I believe it's going to be the most important episode of Into the Wardrobe to date, so please take a second, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss this conclusion. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, before we go on, I want to answer a question about my sponsorship with Boyce College. Why is it I believe so strongly in a school like Boyce? Well, the fact is there are 3 factors of college life that shape who a student will be when they graduate. Number 1, the professors that teach them. Number 2, the friends that influence them. And number 3, the values of the campus culture that surrounds them. Now, these are a reflection of the school's priorities. And at Boyce College, faith in Christ is always the priority first and foremost. Boyce students are immersed in an academic environment that helps them grow in spiritual maturity while gaining the best in career preparation and training in God's Word. To learn how keeping faith first produces graduates who are future ready and kingdom focused, please go to boycecollege.com/faith. Well, today is an exciting day, and I can't wait to dive in, so let's get started. It's time to leave the Shadowlands behind and journey to a world that's more real than our own. It's time to follow me into the wardrobe. Before we dive in too deep here, let's do a quick refresher. Who exactly were the famous 7 Lost Lords of Narnia? Now, here's where the spoilers actually start, so please be warned. In the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, we learned that they were Telmarine noblemen who were loyal to King Caspian IX and were effectively exiled by his brother, the usurper Miraz. The 7 lords, Lord Revilian, Lord Byrne, Lord Argaz, Lord Mavremorn, Lord Octesian, Lord Restamar, and Lord Roop, were sent away by Miraz to explore the far eastern seas, which was actually just Miraz's thinly veiled attempt to get them out of Narnia and further strengthen his power hold on the nation. Now, not surprisingly, none of these men ever returned. Now, as an aside, one has to wonder why men allowed themselves to be sent away in a time when their nation so obviously needed their leadership the most. Now, I'm just speculating here, but it might reveal a little bit about the character of these men, as you'll soon see. When Miraz was overthrown and Caspian X reclaimed the throne of Narnia, he promised Aslan that he would one day set out into the unexplored eastern seas to find all 7 lost lords and either bring them home or at least discover their fate. Now, after a long voyage and many thrilling trials, Caspian does eventually find all 7 of the lost lords, or at least what's left of them. Now, if you're like me, you've long suspected that there was something deeper going on here than just some seafaring adventure, but what? For the longest time, I couldn't figure out how these lords, these islands, were connected. But as I've said before, anytime you see the number 7 in Narnia, it should throw up a flag that there is something significant going on beneath the surface. And then I had a breakthrough. Well, actually, I found someone else's breakthrough. I came across a fantastic piece of scholarly work by Dr. Thomas L. Martin, which I'll link to below. In it, he proposes exactly what I had suspected, that the 7 trials and the pitfalls that led to the downfall of these 7 lords directly corresponded to the 7 deadly sins. Now, in the rest of this episode, I'll take you through the first 4 lords and the specific traps that they fell into. And then, in the next episode, after we look at the remaining 3 lords, that's when I'm going to show you what's been missing in this picture all along. And it will change the way that you'll think about this book forever. It's going to be a mind-blowing episode, so again, please take a second and subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss this big reveal. So, with all that setup out of the way, let's take a look at the fate of the first 4 Lost Lords. Number 1, Lord Byrne. Lord Byrne is discovered to be alive and well on the lone island, where he'd been living for about 7 years. It turns out he had fallen in love with a girl on the island and had also grown tired of the sea. And with the threat of Miraz still in power in Narnia, he decided to abandon his quests and settle down on the lone islands. Now, this might seem like a reasonable course of action for most people, but let's not forget this was one of the great lords of Narnia. He was a sworn protector of the kingdom. He wasn't a man who was meant to give it all away for a relaxing life of comfort and simple pleasures. He was meant to fight for his country. His name, Byrne, even means warrior. And he shows his talents for battle when he helps Caspian devise a plan to overthrow the corrupt governor of the Lone Islands. Now, make no mistake, Lord Byrne fell to the first temptation, the first of the 7 deadly sins, the sin of luxuria. So, what is luxuria? Well, it's where we get the word luxury, but it actually refers to abandoning one's duties for personal pleasure or comfort. And for Lord Byrne, this meant abandoning his duty to either fulfill the order Miraz had given him and sail eastward, or to return to Narnia and fight for the kingdom. Instead, he chose the easy path of comfort. Number 2, Lord Octesian. While Lord Octesian's body was never recovered, it was all but certain that he had met his doom on Dragon Island, where he presumably suffered the same fate as Eustace, specifically taking the treasure from a dragon's hoard and either being killed by a dragon or by becoming one himself. Now, at first blush, you might think that Octesian's sin involves something like greed. However, if Eustace and Octesian both succumb to the same moral trap, then we know that the issue was not greed. Instead, it was pride. Eustace was an insufferable braggart. He was a snob and a know-it-all. And in truth, his pride served as a protective armor, an ugly, thick skin that hid his human frailty. And when he took the dragon's hoard, he grew scales on the outside to match the scales on the inside. It wasn't until Aslan literally ripped the scales off that the frail and humble human was revealed. Yes, this island was a test of the deadly sin of superbia. Now, a quick side note, Octesian's name actually presents an amazing clue that will confirm this theory, but in a way that will completely surprise you. And we'll have to talk about that in the next episode, so stay tuned. Number 3, Lord Restamar. Lord Restamar, whose name literally means rest at sea, was discovered in the deadly waters of, well, Deathwater Island. He fell into the magical pool that turned anything that touched it into solid gold. Now, one important thing to consider about this island is that the magical properties of the water aren't inherently evil, and they don't actually even have to be dangerous, as long as you approach the waters with respect. Edmund was able to leave the island with a pair of solid gold boots and a piece of solid gold heather, no problem. But what if a person wanted too much? What if they tried to dip something bigger, say a rock or a sword? The sheer weight of their treasure turning to gold might pull them into the water as well. Quite literally, their greed would be their downfall. And that was the trap that Lord Restamar fell into, the trap of avaritia, which we now know as greed. Now, Caspian himself felt waves of greed creeping upon him, and he and the others decided to leave the island as quickly as possible. Number 4, Lord Roop. Lord Roop was rescued from the terrible and mysterious island known as Dark Island, where he'd been unable to escape for many years. Now, what made this island so awful? Well, according to Lord Roop, it was a place that made your dreams come true. Now, this was actually a very enticing prospect to several members of the Dawn Treader crew, and they were tempted to go deeper into the island's dark mist. But Lord Roop explained that he was not talking about desires, but actual dreams. It was a place of nightmares. So to be honest, I had a hard time making sense out of this island and couldn't figure out exactly what it might represent. I mean, after all, many of the deadly sins are birthed from particular desires. But Dr. Martin suggests that the desires that are so tempting here are based on what he calls shadow desires, the desire to have that which is owned by another person, thus creating the shadow of a dream for that which they do not possess. Therefore, Dr. Martin proposes that the trial of this island is the temptation of invidia, or envy. Now, this is a really clever way to describe envy, and I suppose it might be a possibility. And in the next episode, you'll see that when it comes to the 7 deadly sins, this is the most probable answer just due to plain old process of elimination. But I actually believe that what I've discovered is really the missing piece to this puzzle. And it actually means some major changes to the entire theory. It's going to be really cool, so stay tuned. Well, that's as far as we're going to get today. But before the next episode drops, let me encourage you. Take some time and go back and read again through this book one more time. Look and see how much the story changes. How much does it take on a totally new life when the deeper meaning is revealed? And above all else, please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I would love to know if you could succeed where I struggled. Can you figure out which of the 3 remaining lords fell into which sin? Let me know what you discover. As always, I'll look forward to seeing you again next time as we take another journey into the wardrobe. A very heartfelt thanks to all my supporters of Patreon. This episode couldn't have happened without your help. If you want to support the important work of this channel and make sure the episodes continue, you can join our community by visiting patreon.com/intothewardrobe.